Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Welcome, everybody. Carter Froelich. Great to be in front of you again. Today, we've got a really interesting topic. At least I think it's interesting. It can mean a lot of money to our developers who embrace this concept. And the concept I'm going to be talking about today is the project diagnostic review. And it sounds like it's a really kind of a complicated surgical process, and to some degree it is, but it's really not. It's just going through the pro forma of our project to make sure that we are capturing all the revenues that we have available potentially to our project, and to the extent that it's possible that we are reducing our infrastructure burden or our costs that are being conditioned to our project. Now, I will have to mention that there is some math involved in this if you really want to get into the weeds. And as it relates to getting into the weeds, I've included in our show notes a PowerPoint that will show the financial implications of the 4 topics we're going to be discussing here today. But as part of the podcast, I'm only going to be talking about the concepts. I'm not going to get into the details. The details will be laid out in the show notes. So I encourage you to download the show notes and follow along. But for purposes of the podcast, I'm only going to be talking about the concepts. How do we do a project diagnostic review? First thing that is important for us, or for you as the developer, if you're doing this yourself, and is to sit down with your land use plan, your job cost or your construction cost estimates, and your project pro forma. That's where we start. Number one, we have to know what your project is, where it's located. Is there any development around you? Is it built out around you? Is it raw land? Are there other benefiting landowners next to your project? Where is your project in context to the geography and the municipality, the county, et cetera. Number 2, what are your costs? What do you see that you have to build? What has the jurisdiction conditioned you with building? And what are you estimating that those costs are going to be? And then number 3, we want to see how those construction costs flow into your pro forma, and when you're going to be spending the money and when you're anticipating to be receiving revenues. The first area that we're going to look at, and here again, we deal in special purpose taxing districts, so we want to take a look to see if you've included the use of special purpose taxing districts. And you'll say, what the hell is a special purpose taxing district? Well, they have a lot of different names. CFD in California, Arizona, and in Hawaii, PIDs in New Mexico, Utah, and Texas, municipal utilities districts in Texas, community development districts in Florida. There's just a whole acronym of different abbreviations and names, but basically they're in most cases special purpose subdivisions that are separate and distinct from the jurisdiction in which they're established. And it allows us to issue tax-exempt bonds to build public infrastructure. And those bonds, or the obligation to pay back the bonds, is passed on to the end users. So when we're going through and setting up these special purpose taxing districts, it's a great way for us to tell the jurisdictions that this is a way for growth to pay for growth, and the existing residents of your community are not going to be taxed as a result of this. It's strictly those that are creating the growth are going to be paying for it. And they're very, very commonplace, especially in the states that I mentioned. So the first thing that we're going to go look at, and is if your project hasn't put this into its pro forma, we're going to ask you why. Because generally, if you're in a market that is doing special districts and you're not doing one, you're leaving money on the table. Because most people are making their buy decision based upon the location of the project, the amenities that the project provides, what is the floor plan, the elevation of the home, the wife or the has fallen in love with the kitchen, and the husband's fallen in love with the barbecue in the backyard and the garage. I mean, they're buying the house for some other reason than property taxes. And to the extent that our competitive market has a higher property tax rate, what we have is the ability to go in, increase our property tax rate to be on par, or, if we have a better mousetrap, slightly higher than the competition, set up a district, issue bonds to finance infrastructure, and that money is going to come into our top line revenues. So if we don't have it, we're going to recommend that you go in and put in a special purpose taxing district to help offset some of those costs and enhance your revenues. If you have it, then we're going to go in and give you our recommendation, whether we think that, yep, you're at the level you should be, or your competitive marketplace is actually higher, and would you consider increasing your effective ad valorem tax rate to pull some more money out of your project. So that is the first step in looking at your revenue stream. Have you included public financing vehicles if you're in a market where those are typically utilized? Second, a lot of areas where we find our developers building infrastructure, a lot of times the jurisdictions will come to them and say, hey, we're really glad you're here building this master plan community. We really want this. But that residential communities don't pay for themselves, right? And we'll generally respond by, really, that's news to us. And the cities are basically trying to get us to fund some of their operational costs. And they'll say, we're going to have to build a new fire station. We're going to have to bring more police on. We're going to have more fire. We're going to have more administrative burden. And as a result of that, we want to condition your project to pay us $1 million a year. And we've done a fiscal impact that shows how your master plan community is going to be an absolute drain on our general fund. And I'm being a little bit facetious, but not much. But that is the general concept. The cities and all the jurisdictions feel that residential development, master plan communities is a huge suck on their general fund, which we absolutely do not agree with, nor does the National Association of Home Builders. But in those kind of instances, if your project has been conditioned to pay these operational shortfalls, what we're going to ask the city is, really show us how you came up with your $1 million. A lot of times they can't even, they can't demonstrate how they came up with their numbers. If they can demonstrate how they came up with their numbers, in most cases, they had a municipal economist prepare some sort of net fiscal impact analysis on the impacts of your project on the city's coffers. So to the extent that they've done that, we will ask to get a copy of that fiscal impact that was prepared by the municipal consultant. 9 times out of 10, as we go through and perform an audit on the fiscal impact, and I don't like to bring this up, but I'm a recovering CPA, but I think I'm a pretty fun one. But we learned a lot of skills in becoming a CPA, because we had to go through and do a lot of audits. I did audits for 2 years and 2 months, too long, as I like to say. But we did learn some really important work habits as an auditor. And that was that every number that we put in an audit had to be substantiated and backed up with real substantive information. So we'll go through and we will audit, for lack of a better term, the jurisdictional consultants' assumptions. And in most instances, I shouldn't say all, but probably 8.5 out of 10, the economist is not utilizing the real levels of service that are currently being provided by the city, meaning they're making numbers up. And they're making numbers up, and I hate to make this as an over generalization, but the numbers will favor their client. Let's just leave it at that. And so we're very skeptical when we look at these net fiscal impacts that are prepared by the jurisdictional consultants. So what we will do is go back and take a look at the city's CAFRA, their comprehensive annual financial report, and we will determine what is the city's real level of service as it relates to providing police and fire service. What is the real cost of a fire professional, a police professional? We will go through the departmental list of personnel related to the city's manager's office, the city clerk's office, the development services department, and we will come up with metrics that we can tie back and extrapolate based upon the increased population that will be generated by your project. And we can really come in and using the city's real numbers, real levels of service, and we can determine if the city's consultant is reasonable or not. And here again, our experience, if we're using real numbers, real levels of service, and using the city's financial records as backup material for our work, generally we have found that these projects pay for themselves. Obviously, they do over the long term. Most of the time, they will do on an annual basis as well when you look at all the revenue that'll be generated. And we're able to demonstrate that, you know what, we really shouldn't be paying this shortfall at all. Here's why. And by the way, these are your real operating results, Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. City Manager. And at that point, the discussion is pretty much over because they can't argue against their own numbers. I mean, these are fact-based analyses as opposed to wishful analyses. So if you're conditioned to pay some sort of operational shortfall, we want to understand what it is, what it's for, how they came up with their numbers, and we want to go in and eliminate that municipal operational shortfall payment as much as possible. So we see that a lot in California primarily, but we're seeing it in other jurisdictions around the country as budgets get tighter. So moving on to the third item we're really going to focus on is development impact fees and credit analysis. Now, on the topic of development impact fees, there's really two minds that we have, and for our two sets of clients. Obviously, land developer clients like to see development impact fees, especially as it relates to their project, as large as possible, so they have that money coming back to repay them for large regional infrastructure that they're having to build. And on the home builder side, they like to see the development impact fees as low as possible. We, as kind of caught in the middle, believe that development impact fees are a necessary evil as long as they're fair and equitable. So I'm going to be talking out of both sides of my mouth a little bit as we talk about development impact fees. If we have a line item related to development impact fees, the first thing that we're going to go in and do is look at what are the impact fees for, and do they seem to be fair and equitable? And there's a lot of case law behind this, a lot of legal cases, there's industry standards. There's also the whole concept of the dual rational nexus test, which means basically that there has to be a nexus or a cause for a individual developer or a builder to pay the impact fee, and that impact fee has to be proportional to the financial impact caused by the demand for new services, roads, water, sewer, etc. From that standpoint, we're going to look at the impact fee and is it reasonable? If the jurisdiction is in the process of updating their impact fees, we have worked a lot for the National Association of Home Builders, various BIAs around the country, to evaluate the reasonableness of the impact fees and to fight those fees. To date, we've averaged about 24.6% reduction in impact fees, just because a lot of times development impact fees are made as instructed, meaning the cities will literally look at the other cities around them and they'll say, gosh, all the cities around us are charging a $25,000 impact fee. Our impact fee is only $10,000. Make our impact fee the same as everybody else's impact fee. I'm not kidding you. And so they go in, they cook the books, and they magically end up with a $25,000 impact fee. We go in and look to determine if that is fair and equitable. If it's not, we're going to fight, and we're going to ask for a reduction in that impact fee so that we're adhering to case law, industry standards, and the concept of dual rational nexus tests. So to the extent that you were having to pay a lot of development impact fees and we're able to lower that amount of impact fees that have to be paid, that's a good thing, and that'll fall to your bottom line. On the other hand, if we have a very large master plan community that we're building, and we're building a lot of regional infrastructure that is going to be benefiting, this whole area, at some point, we don't have enough money through the special purpose taxing districts. And we still have all this huge regional offsite and onsite infrastructure to build. So what we will literally do is sit down with the jurisdiction and say, hey, jurisdiction, we've got to build a lot of, we've got to expand your wastewater treatment plant. We've got to expand your water treatment plant. We're building an interchange. We're putting in huge parkways offsite and onsite to get from the interchange to our master plan and then drive that parkway through our master plan. I mean, this is a lot of infrastructure. We would like you to set up a special service area over the boundaries of our project, and we would like to be able to recoup some of these large regional costs through an impact fee. We will then go through and prepare or work with their consultants to put together an impact fee that allows the developer to be paid for this large transportation, water, sewer, water resource fees that need to be collected to help pay for this infrastructure. And in order to maximize the amount of revenue that's coming back to the developer, one of the strategies we'll set up is, hey, let's use the impact fees to pay for these parkways and expansions of the wastewater treatment plant and the water treatment plant, for example. We will finance those with equity or third-party debt and be repaid over time. And then let's use the special district for the financing of all the arterial roads and the collector roads and all the trunk lines that fall underneath that. So that might be one strategy. So what we're going to be doing is looking at the line items that you have in relation to what has to be built. Is there an opportunity for us to either decrease the impact fees if the project is not a real large project, or is there a way for us to increase the amount of reimbursements coming through impact fees to the master plan community by setting up or modifying the jurisdiction's development impact fee program? So part 3B of that is then, to the extent that we are building infrastructure and we're financing infrastructure either through developer equity or debt or through the special purpose taxing district, have we gone through and determined what our development impact fee credits are? And have we memorialized that as the jurisdiction bought off on that, so that we know that when either that money is going to come back to us, or we're going to pass that credit on to the builders, and we're going to show that credit as part of our land residual when we're selling the land to the builder, saying, hey, Mr. Ms. Builder, the development impact fee is $25,000 in the jurisdiction. However, we've gotten a $7,000 credit. So when you go to the window, you're only going to be paying $18,000. We would like that fact memorialized in the land residual analysis we're using to come up with our sales price on our lot. But this is which ultimately then will flow into your top line. So here again, most jurisdictions don't know how to calculate correctly development impact fee credits. We're here to help you to make sure you've got the right credit and that we can articulate why that's the right credit to the jurisdiction, so that, number one, we know what it is, we've memorialized it with the city, and we're able to communicate with operations in the case that we're a home builder, or to be able to communicate with the sales team if we're selling to builders and passing on that credit. So it's a really big item. Number 4, last but not least, is other infrastructure cost reduction strategies. So one of the things that we wanted to get, and I mentioned at the onset of the podcast, is I want to get a look at your land use plan. Why do I want to look at the land use plan? I want to see if taking a look at your job cost and your land use plan, if we're building any other infrastructure that is going to benefit any other surrounding landowners. And let's say, for instance, we have to build 4 lanes of an arterial road that border our property and someone else's property adjacent to us. Typically, we would only have to build 2 lanes, okay, meaning the 2 lanes that are directly adjacent to our property. But if for some reason the jurisdiction said, hey, if you want your district, you're going to have to build these 4 lanes, and we agree to that, I want to make sure that we've set up some sort of mechanism so that we can tag the other benefiting landowner so they pay us sooner rather than later once they begin development of their project, or they pull a building permit. We generally don't like tailcoat riders, meaning landowners that just sit and wait for the large developers to build their project and then they get a free ride and don't have to pay for it. So as part of that, we want to work with the jurisdiction and make sure that, to the extent that they don't have an ordinance that allows us to tag them with their fair share of that infrastructure, that we sit down and say, hey, listen, this isn't fair, and it's not being picked up in the development impact fee program. We would like you to enact an ordinance to make these benefiting landowners pay for their fair share cost of this infrastructure. Most of the time, jurisdictions will do that, and it'll get. We like to have it recorded against the property, and different states and different jurisdictions have different rules, but that is the general concept. But the other thing that we will take a look at is to sit down with the developers, and if they're really interested in accelerating cash into their pro forma, we'll bring up some concepts of selling reimbursements, meaning there's a whole cottage industry of investors that will buy reimbursements coming back from water taps, sewer taps, development impact fees. We'll have some investors that want to buy special district reimbursements, if you will, especially as it relates to MUDs in Texas, where guys will buy the ability to say a developer has put $50 million in the ground that they haven't been reimbursed, but are anticipated to be reimbursed by a municipal utility district over the next 10 years on that. They could sell that reimbursement today, and I'm just making up numbers, so they may get 25 million today, and the investor will get that 50 million over the next 10 years. Here again, I'm just making up numbers, but if the developer is interested in accelerating cash into their pro forma, that's another idea we're going to bring up. And obviously, there's a lot of different receivables in the different states that we can utilize to accelerate cash into the pro forma. So that concludes kind of the general comments and topics and areas that we're really focused on as it relates to the project diagnostic review. We've illustrated, on an example project, what this can mean in terms of net profit, margin, nominal dollar return, and internal rates of return on a fictitious project. So I encourage you to download, if you haven't already, the show notes to the project diagnostic review. Go through them and you'll see the financial impact of some of the topics we discussed here today. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Land to Lots podcast.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Tune in next week for the next episode.